My number two film that shaped my travel wish list is Apocalypto from 2006. This is a film directed and co-written by Mel Gibson, starring Dalia Hernandez, Raul Max Truello, Gerardo Taracina. And the IMDb plot summary: as the Mayan kingdom faces its decline, a young man is taken on a perilous journey to a world ruled by fear and oppression. So I'll start off like the last one, talking about why this, made my list. Because I have been to Mexico several times, but only to Cabo. So I've only been to Cabo and Tijuana. So only like the tourist destination places. And for me, one thing that movies do is it brings history to life for me. I'm a big fan of history, been since I was a kid, and movies have inspired me to, when I'm in other places, want to go to the ruins, want to go to where the ancient civilizations were. Like that is a big desire. That one of the reasons why I love Italy so much is because I also love ancient Rome. I've seen Gladiator and Spartacus and want to go to those locations. And this movie for me, when I saw it when it first came out in the theater, for the first time, I saw a Mayan civilization told on the scale of what I would traditionally see in a film set in ancient Rome, ancient Greece, ancient England, France. There had never been a big budget film made with this culture. And I grew up in the United States. We didn't really study pre-Columbian civilizations, especially in Mexico. We learned a little bit about the Native Americans, but not really. It was all very Eurocentric. So I never even thought about ancient Mayan civilizations, Mexican ruins, until seeing this film. And this film, I have actually a lot of issues with this film, both on the historical accuracy and on the message of it, but we'll get into that later. But the scale of what it was, you see the pyramids, you see these big civilizations, these were large cities, all these things that now make me really want to go visit, the Yucatan Peninsula, see these Mayan ruins, see the pyramids. So have you been to Mexico? Have you seen these ruins? Have you seen the film?
Well, seen the film obviously
Oh, of course. Have you seen the film before?
No, I had not seen the film before.
Okay.
I have been to Mexico and I have seen the pyramids over there, which was amazing.
Oh, cool. I am jealous. I'm very
I
jealous.
wish I'd seen the movie before to kind of really draw the connection. Although I'm curious to hear now that you said that the historical accuracy is sort of all over the place, which I guess I'm not surprised by.
Yeah, it's Mel Gibson. He's terrible at that.
And it's a Hollywood movie, so, the bar is not the highest in general for these sort of things.
Yeah.
But no, yeah, I've never watched it before, so I was trepidatious at the same time, excited to watch a movie of this scale, like you said, and get a chance to, get into a different culture that in a deeper way that I hadn't.
Yeah. I mean, that was, again, something where I never thought about this culture in that way until this film. And well, first of all, I'll say too, like, I'm not a huge Mel Gibson fan as an actor. And I think as a director, even less so, especially with historical stuff that he's done has been like Braveheart is like woefully inaccurate from a historical standpoint. And again, I'll get into that in this movie a little bit too. But what I think he does so well in this film, which I did really like, and I'll caveat it too, or just mention, I should say, that it is subtitled. So he actually used indigenous actors who were actually Mayan ancestry, and they spoke in ancient Mayan, and it's subtitled, the whole thing. And that lends a sense of authenticity to it that really puts you in this world that I think was, again, really important for me to get excited about this civilization. But I think he also does some great things just in the story, where it starts off the beginning of the film where they're dealing with basically just like a guy who hang around with his bros. They're razzing him about stuff. They're, tricking him into eating like the pig's balls. They're giving him some stuff that's supposed to help with his erectile dysfunction, but instead causes a pain to happen in his nether regions. All stuff that you would see in a movie shot today with like a modern like culture. Oh, there's a wife or a mother-in-law who's complaining about, to the son-in-law about how, she wants grandkids, and, the wife gets woken up by a barking dog and she's like, oh, you got to shut that dog up. These are all things that would happen in a modern society. And I think they do a very good job with the script then of making you relate to these guys, because they're just normal dudes hanging out. It just happens to be ancient, Mayan culture, but you immediately relate. They're wearing very interesting kind of garb, have a lot of piercings and tattoos. They're speaking in an ancient language. It's set hundreds of years ago. So I think they do a very good job with that. And then the movie too is a very interesting journey into seeing the different parts of their civilization. It starts out in a little village, but then gets to these giant cities. And again, like, this is my own naivete, I'll admit to that. Like, I didn't really imagine that these Mayan cultures or Aztec cultures as well, because they kind of mix a little bit of the two in this movie, which is one of the problems with it. they had giant cities with like thousands, you know, tens of thousands of people lived in these places. They had markets, they had these amazing architectural technologies, all these things. Again, we just don't in the Western or in the United States, at least. I don't know what it was like in India in terms of you learning about these cultures, but that was
Not
what we
much.
associate with like the Romans, right? That they had all this advanced technology, and you don't really think about the native folks in the Americas that had access to that, but they did. And you see it in this movie, in these giant pyramids, and they knew a lot about science because as there's a scene where our heroes kind of led up to the top of a pyramid and he's about to be executed, but an eclipse comes in and basically kind of saves him. And there's some great moments between the head priest and what's probably like the chief of the city, where you can kind of tell they're kind of looking at each other like, yeah, we knew this was coming. We were playing into this eclipse because they were really good at science. They
Right.
knew all this stuff, but they're kind of using that to play into the the power structure that they have there of the rest of the city. So I think that is really cool, and I love the end sequence of the last act of this movie. It's basically just a chase sequence in a jungle, and there's elements of Predator and elements of Rambo, where he's like has to make the jungle work for him against all the people that are chasing him, because the movie is basically one giant chase scene for him to get back to his wife and his kid, which I think is relatable too. So I think on that level, the movie really works. I mean, did you find it enjoyable at that level?
I think technically, storytelling wise, like it's actually pretty amazing. You're totally transported. And like you said, it feels relatable, but at the same time harrowing.
Mm-hmm.
And it's brilliantly made, performed, acted. It feels real. Like you sort of feel like you're there, which I know is sort of stating the obvious, but you really feel that way in this movie.
Mm-hmm.
That said, though, it's a pretty brutal experience to
Mm.
watch this movie. I don't think I'm ever going to watch it again. So it's definitely a brutal experience. So I was very curious, like, what has made you go visit these places after, being put in such a brutal experience of watching the movie? But it's clarifying that it's more about the journey through history and time, which this movie does an amazing job at.
Mm-hmm.
And I agree. Like I learned a lot about accurate or not. I learned that ultimately people are people. We care about similar things, the
Right.
things that we want to protect, the things that bother us. And then also a peek into a culture that is not talked about, often ignored, and you sort of walk away with the impression that actually they had a lot going on. But yeah, overall, as a movie, this was a pretty epic experience, and it delivered, I think, what it set out to do.
Yeah, I was surprised when I saw it at the time. I was very intrigued. I saw this when it came out, that even though, again, I didn't like Mel Gibson, but I was like, huh, ancient like Mexican civilization. Like, I'm just curious about this. And I remember
Yeah.
really liking it in the theater and seeing it a couple times in the last, 15 years since it came out. And each time I found it, enjoyable. Though, again, that being said, and after I did see it, and you were even saying you kind of assume that this is accurate. And I think that is kind of pigging back on what we were talking about a little bit in our previous episode, which was about historical figures and how
Right.
films interpret history. I think the danger of this film is because it is set in this language, and it sort of appears that it's very accurate, and there's some
Right.
things in here that are incredibly like inaccurate that I was able to research after seeing this film. I was like, oh, I want to go visit Mexico. I want to learn about these cultures. So it did start that journey in me, but basically, like, they were doing a lot of combinations between Aztecs and Mayans, which existed hundreds of years apart in terms of the peak of their civilizations. The beginning of the film, where there's in the jungle, they were never that primitive. It was almost seeming like they were hunter gatherers, but that civilization, they were farmers. They were very good farmers. They cleared the land, had giant crops, and it would just look like a normal farm, right? But in the movie, it makes it look like it's they're just hunter gatherers. And then with the brutal and sadistic sacrifice scenes that they showed in this movie, the Mayans did some of that, but not a lot. Yes, the Aztecs did some more of it in terms of human sacrifice, but the scale at which the movie implies, like hundreds of bodies that there's a scene where he falls into this pit and there's like literally hundreds of decapitated bodies. That had never happened. Not even the Aztecs were that brutal at all in terms of the level of and the scale of the sacrifice and the bloodlust that they were trying to portray the civilization as having, or at least the city dwellers, right? It was this interesting kind of dichotomy. Oh, the city is this place of sin, and nice in the countryside, there are all these like, nice Mayans who are just cool. They're just trying to hang out. But in the city, there's the evil sin. And then you kind of get the biggest thing that, the more I see this movie, the more it kind of bothers me is the moralizing of it. They start the whole movie with a quote about like civilizations are destroyed from within. And what Mel's really trying to say is, I'll just use these words because I think this is what he's thinking. These savage, primitive cultures have so much violence that they kind of deserved what they got, and they deserve to fall. And it wasn't because of smallpox, which was brought over from the Europeans, not intentionally, but it was. And that killed 90% of all the people in the Americas. 90% were killed because of diseases, not because of anything that the natives are doing to each other. Though there are some theories because the Mayans civilization did collapse, that it was based on climate change. But Mel is really trying to make this point that no, it was the evil and the moral decay of the civilization. And that really rubs me the wrong way. Every time I see this movie, that gets worse and worse, especially the end where they have a scene where the Europeans show up on a beach, which again is hundreds of years too early from when they actually would have shown up there. And they even show they zoom in on a preacher holding up a cross, almost like they're making a religious message that these are the good Christians coming, and this civilization that was not Christian is collapsing because they are so bad because they weren't Christian, and the Christians are now coming to save. And, Mel is a devout Christian and puts a lot of that into his films. And that really does rub me the wrong way, because that's not an accurate depiction of the civilization. They weren't this brutal. They were not savages like this. They did not collapse because of any wrongdoing on their own. It was probably climate change. And the Europeans didn't even show up till hundreds of years after the Mayan civilization was at its peak. And even implying that smallpox was there to begin with. There's a scene when one of the girls, they run across a young child and a dead, like probably her father or something, who clearly has smallpox. Like, it's very clearly smallpox. And she says some statement like, "Oh, you guys, you're cursed, you're bad. This is all the thing that you're bringing this onto the world." Again, kind of blaming this civilization for its own collapse, which feels like moralizing. That stuff I dislike. So I have a kind of a love-hate relationship with this movie, to be honest. I enjoy it from a visceral level, and I still really want to go to the Yucatan and see those ruins. I'm jealous that you've done that already. But the other pieces that Mel puts in here, and his over-the-top sadistic gore, which is what he seems to like too, is unnecessary for what this is.
Unnecessary. That's really great to hear. I mean, not great, but helpful to hear, because I didn't know. And you're right. Like, that's the danger, right? Because like we said in our last episode, for very famous people, movies are not meant to be documentaries. And if you want to learn more, there's a lot available. But for, cultures like these that are not so talked about anyway, if this is the only thing that you're going to watch to understand and learn more about this culture, then that's going to shape what you think and how you feel. And that's kind of dangerous, even though I do think every filmmaker can put their own spin and have their interpretation for sure. But it gets dicey and dangerous in a context like this. And even though I didn't know about this, I was like, yeah, he's like really reveling in this whole bloodlust gore. There's no need for that, really. We get it. Even if this were true, I was like, yeah, I got it 30 minutes ago that this is pretty brutal. We don't have to beat that, over the head again and again.
Right. But that was the message. He had to show it's brutal because they had to get wiped out because they were brutal, is sort of the message that I think he was trying to get at there. So, I mean, that being said, though, it did inspire me to learn all this. Like, I did this all on my own. After I saw this movie, I went online and looked up these cultures and read a little bit more about it and realized how inaccurate it was. But it did inspire me to take that step. And now, again, I want to go there. But I think to the vast majority of audiences who might see this, which was actually a pretty big commercial hit, especially for being an R-rated subtitled movie. If you just kind of casually go in this on a Saturday afternoon, get your popcorn, watch the film, you might leave and thinking, damn, those Mayans were really kind of bad news. Thank God that they got wiped out. That's the danger, I think, Totally. I still recommend seeing the film. I enjoy it, and I can't wait to go to Mexico. You'll have to give me some tips after the podcast of which pyramids to go to. Hey there, it's Alex. If you like the review and discussion Karan and I just had, make sure you subscribe to our channel, Movies That Shaped Us, to get full episodes. Every other Wednesday, Karan and I cover a topic around important people, places, events, and moments in our lives, and then explore it through 3 of our favorite movies. Subscribe right now, or follow our podcast on Spotify or Apple Podcasts via the link in the description below. Hope you join us for the journey.